Florida's tourism board would pay real money to keep this video off your screen. Because tonight I'm ranking the 13 towns in the Sunshine State so dangerous that even the people who live there won't drive through certain blocks after dark. I'm not talking about the same 2 Miami zip codes every list recycles. I mean the towns where the violent crime rate runs 6 times the national average. Where a farm town that grows tomatoes for half the country sits under almost 30% poverty. Where a rocket lifts off 10 miles from a street the locals avoid at night. And where a town that once had more millionaires per capita than almost anywhere in America can't outrun what it's become. Every number tonight comes from real data. FBI-sourced crime reporting compiled by sites like NeighborhoodScout and AreaVibes, Census figures, and local Florida reporting. I'll name the source as we go. Rankings shift year to year, so treat these as recent snapshots, not permanent verdicts. And remember, a whole town is never just one statistic. But the statistics are real, and they say something the brochures never will. If this video hits 50,000 likes, I'll do a part 2. And honestly, Florida has enough material for a part 5. If you're the kind of person who can't look away from this stuff, hit subscribe right now. Let's count it down. Number 13, Immokalee. When I first drove into Immokalee, it looked like the reason Florida feeds half the country, endless tomato fields stretching to the horizon. This town literally calls itself the tomato capital of the United States. But according to Neighborhood Scout data, close to 28% of residents live below the poverty line, more than double the state average, and the odds of a property crime run near 1 in 131 a year. The violent numbers aren't the worst on this list, and that's the honest caveat. But when the workers feeding the country live in some of the poorest conditions in the state, the statistics say something the produce aisle never will. Immokalee earns the bottom slot as a warning of the pattern running through everything that follows. Poverty first, crime second. Number 12, Palatka. Palatka sits on the St. Johns River, moss hanging off the oaks, bass boats lined up at the marina. It calls itself the bass fishing capital of the world. But per AreaVibes' FBI-sourced figures, Palatka's overall crime rate runs about 4,003 per 100,000 people, 89% above the national average, driven almost entirely by property crime near 3,735 per 100,000, more than double the national number. Here's the twist. Violent crime in Palatka actually runs slightly below the national average. This is a poverty story more than a violent story, and the poverty rate, near 42%, is one of the highest of any town in Florida. Palatka is proof that a crime rate can be brutal without a single punch being thrown. Number 11, Quincy. In the 1920s, a local banker convinced half of Quincy to buy Coca-Cola stock right after it went public and never sell. By some counts, the town ended up with 67 Coca-Cola millionaires, more wealth per capita than almost anywhere in America, and you can still see it in the old brick downtown. Then the shade tobacco market collapsed in the 1970s, and Gadsden County, with Quincy as its seat, became one of the poorest counties in the state, with county-level crime data now running well above the state average. Quincy is what happens when the money leaves and never comes back. The mansions are still standing. The economy that built them isn't. Number 10, Fort Pierce. This is where the Navy trained its first frogmen in World War II, the forerunners of today's Navy SEALs, and where author Zora Neale Hurston is buried, her grave unmarked for decades until Alice Walker found it. But according to AreaVibes crime data, Fort Pierce's violent crime rate runs close to double the national average, with property crime nearly as elevated and a poverty rate close to 29%. When I drove past the revitalized marina and murals downtown, it looked like a comeback story. A few blocks over, the numbers say the comeback hasn't reached everyone yet. If you're learning things about Florida you never expected, hit subscribe. I cover the best and worst places to live in America every week, and this list only gets heavier from here. Number 9, Cocoa. Cocoa sits 10 miles from Kennedy Space Center, and on launch days, people fill Cocoa Village's antique shops and riverfront cafes to watch rockets climb into orbit. According to AreaVibes data, Cocoa's overall crime rate runs near 1,600 per 100,000 people, driven mostly by property crime and concentrated well outside the tourist district. Some of the most advanced technology on the planet launches a few miles from streets locals actively avoid after dark. The Space Coast's brightest achievement and one of its roughest towns share a zip code. Number 8, Pahokee. Pahokee is a town of about 6,000 people on Lake Okeechobee that has produced nearly 60 NFL players, more per capita than almost any town in America, including Fred Taylor, Santonio Holmes, and Anquan Bolden. But the poverty rate here sits at 37.6%, more than double the national number, and local reporting has named Pahokee one of the most dangerous small towns in the state. The good news, and it matters, is that recent year-over-year data shows both violent and property crime dropping sharply. Pahokee is a town actively trying to outrun its own numbers, one football season at a time. Number 7. Opa-locka. This is the strangest entry on the list architecturally. It was built in the 1920s around an Arabian Nights theme, with the largest collection of Moorish revival buildings in the Western Hemisphere. City Hall is a sheikh's palace. The train station is a mosque. It should be a tourist attraction. Instead, after the Navy pulled out following World War II, the city declined so steeply that in 2004, it recorded the highest violent crime rate of any city in the United States. Crime has dropped since then, but Opa-locka still carries some of the highest rates in Miami-Dade County. The domes and minarets are real. So is the history of a town the federal government once called the most violent in America. Number 6. Lake Worth Beach. This one throws people because Lake Worth Beach has genuine beach town charm, a bohemian arts scene, a walkable downtown with a real independent streak. But according to crime data compiled from FBI reporting, the violent crime rate here sits around 933 per 100,000 people, more than double the statewide average. Walk the beach and the Antique District, and you'd never guess it. Walk a few blocks inland, and the numbers start making sense. Lake Worth Beach is proof that a few miles of coastline don't average out an entire city's numbers. Number 5. Riviera Beach. Riviera Beach is home to the port of Palm Beach, a working deepwater port that moves real cargo and real money through this stretch of coast. It's also, according to local crime data, been running a higher crime rate than most Florida cities since the 1960s. Recent figures put the odds of violent crime victimization around 1 in 108 in a given year, and property crime closer to 1 in 28. The port brings freight, jobs, and tax revenue right through downtown, and none of it has pulled the surrounding neighborhoods out of decades of entrenched crime. Riviera Beach is a working port city and a struggling one, stacked on top of each other. Number 4. Lake City. Lake City sits at the junction of Interstate 75 and Interstate 10, the literal gateway into Florida for anyone driving down from Georgia, near the Olustee Battlefield, site of Florida's largest Civil War battle. According to crime data compiled from FBI reporting, Lake City's overall crime rate runs above 1,500 per 100,000 people, with some sources ranking its violent crime rate among the highest of any city in the state. For a town of around 12,000 people, that's staggering. Lake City is the front door to Florida for a lot of travelers, and the statistics suggest it's not always a gentle welcome. Number 3. Mangonia Park. Mangonia Park is tiny, a couple thousand people tucked between two highway corridors near West Palm Beach. According to crime data analysis, it posts one of the highest overall crime rates of any town in Florida, over 6,000 per 100,000 people, with property crime alone running above 7,500 per 100,000, the highest property crime rate in the state. Locals and researchers point to the same explanation. Two major thoroughfares running straight through town pull in crime from its larger, rougher neighbors. Mangonia Park barely shows up on a map, and it tops nearly every Florida danger list published. If you've made it this far, drop a like. It genuinely helps this video reach people trying to figure out where in Florida is actually safe to live. Number 2. Belle Glade. Belle Glade sits on the southern edge of Lake Okeechobee, built entirely around sugarcane, earning the nickname Muck City for the black soil that made the crop possible. It's also, according to NeighborhoodScout data, one of the highest crime communities in the country of any size, with the odds of violent crime victimization running around 1 in 86 a year, compared to roughly 1 in 345 for the average Floridian. Over 28% of residents live in poverty. When the sugar economy tightened, the numbers filled the gap. Belle Glade isn't a punchline, it's a company town where the company can't carry everyone anymore. Before we get to number 1, if you've made it this far, drop a comment and subscribe. I put out videos like this every week on the best and worst places to live across America. Number 1. Florida City. If you've ever driven Highway 1 toward the Keys, you've passed through Florida City without necessarily noticing it. The last stretch of gas stations and fruit stands before the road narrows, and the Everglades swallow the horizon. But according to FBI data, Florida City has the highest violent crime rate of any city in the state, around 2,290 per 100,000 people, more than 6 times the national average. The odds of being a victim of violent crime here run near 1 in 45 a year. Property crime is worse, close to 1 in 11. Census data puts the poverty rate around 41%. Florida City sits at the convergence of 2 highways, near known drug trafficking corridors, with a fraction of the policing resources a city this exposed would need. It's the literal last stop before paradise, and the numbers say it's also the most dangerous town in the state. People still raise families here, run the fruit stands, and love this stretch of road because it's home. That's the hard truth sitting under every town on this list. These 13 towns aren't the Florida you see in the ads. They're not South Beach or the theme parks or the golf resorts, but every one of them is a real place with real people and real numbers. The Chamber of Commerce would rather you never look up. Poverty, single industry economies, and highways that carry trouble in and out. That's the pattern running under almost all of it, from Florida City at the top to Immokalee at the bottom. If this helped you see Florida a little more honestly, subscribe and drop a comment telling me which of these towns you've actually driven through. I'll see you in the next one.